Man's going to tie this all together is a man who has written many, many wonderful words about many, many things. And now he's going to speak them for you. This man is phenomenal, the one and only Frye Gaillard.
I guess back in the 1970s, I was living in Nashville and decided I wanted to write about country music, and the people who kind of gave it its substance, who were the songwriters, those were the people that interested me most. And every time I get to hang around Davis and Pamela and John and these other great songwriters, I think back about a friend of mine that I knew really well in the early and mid-1970s. He was a guy named Vince Matthews. Vince came to Nashville about the same time that Chris Christopherson and some of those other guys came, and he hung out with them a lot. And the word was that Vince was the first person that Chris Christopherson ever played me and Bobby McGee for. And Vince told Chris that it was a really great song, except for that line about freedom being another word for nothing left to lose. He said, take that out, it disrupts the storyline. Fortunately, Christopherson ignored that advice, and the rest is history. Vince had his moments, though. He had songs cut by Johnny Cash and Hank Williams Jr. and Gordon Lightfoot and a number, Charlie Pride, Crystal Gale, and a number of other people. But he also endured these long, frustrating periods of failure when nobody seemed to be listening to the music, and that's an experience I think a lot of songwriters have too, and you just they kind of never know. I started writing a profile of Vince when he was at the very bottom. He had gone a whole year without making a cent from his music. And by the time I finished writing the profile, he'd had cuts by a newcomer named Gene Watson, whose Vince song Love in the Hot Afternoon went to number 5, and Crystal Gale and some other people, so all of a sudden he was hot property before I even finished writing about him. I'm going to share just a brief snippet of that story, because it's kind of the quintessential songwriter story. I'm sorry to say Vince is no longer with us, but his spirit is. It was a rainy Nashville night, the dregs of winter, as Vince Matthews and his Budweiser stumbled down a back alley stairway and ducked into the automobile of a friend. Vince was entering that happy stage of inebriation in which his tongue is unleashed on a variety of philosophical rampages, ranging from the evils of Richard Nixon to the trials and tribulations of writing country songs. The latter subject is actually most interesting to him, for like most people, Vince finds himself one of the world's most fascinating topics of conversation. Unlike most people, he may be right. He has been knocking around Nashville for a dozen years, writing songs that run the gamut from terrible to poignant, and building, sometimes consciously, a richly deserved reputation as the quintessential crazy, mixed-up, manic-depressive, unlucky, when you're hot, when you're not kind of songwriter who is still hanging in there and no doubt will be as long as he's breathing. You gotta live it, man, he said with slurry-tongued sincerity, as the car bounced gingerly along the alleyway potholes. And with that, he launched into a story of how he once hitchhiked to Chicago with $5 in his pocket, arrived with only one, and spent 3 days in a drainage culvert wondering how to spend a lonesome dollar bill. Eventually, he said to hell with it and threw it away. After miraculously failing to starve, he somehow wound up in Nashville again, where he wrote a song about the whole experience. Johnny Cash heard it, recorded it, and before long, wrinkled, crinkled, wadded dollar bill had made it to the country music charts, and Vince became temporarily rich. I think, he said, as his mind wandered reluctantly back to the present, that it's called casting your bread on the water. At least that's what Jesus called it. The parallels between Jesus and Vince are not overwhelming. He has a lot of traits that Jesus might have admired, but throwing away the dollar was more an offering to art than to religion. And in an odd sort of way, it typified Matthew's whole career. There's nothing he loved more than a wallet full of money, but he steadfastly refused to become a slave to its pursuit. And the refusal kept him pure, personification of the uncommercialized side of country music. I like Vince a lot, says Johnny Cash with a nod of somber finality. He's probably one of the greatest writers this business has ever had. I sure would like to see him make it. Personally, I didn't think it would make a whole lot of difference to Vince, for he was equally at home, cruising around Nashville in a Cadillac he couldn't afford, or selling the damn thing and hitching a ride with a friend, which is what he did a little while back. And as we rumbled down the alleyway toward a little tavern where the pickers gather for pinball and beer, he began to talk about a deal he had struck with a publishing company. A songwriter's dream, he affirmed with a sweeping gesture that sent the rearview mirror spinning into non-alignment. Oops, sorry, he said, making a feeble attempt at repairing the damage. Anyway, man, I ain't saying it's been easy, but hell, I'm only 33. That's not too bad, is it? I got 2 songs on the charts. I got a good deal with a publisher. I just might make it this time. But then, he said, opening the door and pausing half in and half out for an eloquent summation, I suppose I've said that before. As he grinned and went trudging off into the Nashville rain, humming off-key and wobbling toward a fog-shrouded honky-tonk, you had the feeling somehow that country music just might survive its bout with success. Thank you.
Frye Gaillard. Wow. Did you write that? You wrote that?
I write these words well, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you know what, Frye, we got